Today your focus is going to be on exponential functions learning target 3C, which has to do with graphing. So please get out your tracking sheet from exponential functions. Remember that there are two types of equations for exponential functions. It is either y equals your y-intercept times your common ratio raised to the x, or it can also be y equals your y-intercept divided by your common ratio to the x. Now what we're going to do is look at how to write this equation from a graph. So if you need to pause the video throughout this, make sure you do. You should have your tracking sheet in front of you at this time, and what you're going to do is take a highlighter and highlight 5a, which is write an exponential function given a graph. Here we know the success criteria is determine the y-intercept, then determine the common ratio, and appropriately place this into the equation. So if you look at your example off to the right, I notice there's a dot here and a dot there. In order to determine what your y-intercept is, you are going to look on your y-axis. Your y-axis is your up and down line on your graph. The number that is on the y-axis is 20. So your y-intercept is 20. Then we always start from the left and come to the right. So the first number that I would touch from the left of the dot is at 20, and then the second dot is at 10. So I need to ask myself, are my numbers getting bigger or smaller from left to right? From 20 to 10, my numbers are getting smaller, so I am dividing. Now I ask myself, 20 divided by what number is 10? And that is 2. And that happens to be my common ratio. So now I'm going to write the equation. Y equals what my y-intercept was, which was 20. My numbers are getting smaller from left to right, so it is dividing, we said. And 20 divided by 2 is 10, so my common ratio is 2. Don't forget your raised to the x. Now let's look at two other examples. My success criteria are still there. Remember, in order to find my y-intercept, we look on my y-axis, and that dot is at 5. So my y-intercept is 5. Now we need to determine the common ratio. When we come in from the left, the first number that I hit, or the first dot, is at 5. Then the second dot is at 10. And what I mean by coming in from the left is I'm coming in, starting at my graph from the left. First dot I hit is 5, second dot I hit is 10. And I ask myself, are my numbers getting bigger or smaller? You should say your numbers are getting bigger, so you are timesing. So 5 times what is 10? That is 2. So your common ratio is times 2. Now we're going to put that into my equation. Y equals my y-intercept times 2 raised to the x. Finally, let's look at one other example before you do your practice. I identify my y-intercept is off of my y-axis. So my y-intercept is right there at 6. Now my common ratio, remember we always start from the left of my graph, so I'm coming in from the left, and the first dot that I touch is at 6. I keep going, the next dot I touch is at 3. So I ask myself, is my numbers getting bigger or smaller from 6 to 3? They're getting smaller, so if we're getting smaller, we are dividing. Now I ask myself, 6 divided by what number is 3? And that is 2. So that gives me my common ratio. Finally, we plug that into my equation. Y equals my y-intercept of 6 divided by my common ratio of 2 raised to the x. At any time, if you need to go back and double check this video and see how I got these, please do. Please go ask for the practice and work on that next.